Everyone remembers the car. What almost nobody knows is that every single one of them was destroyed before filming Wrapped, and the last surviving example had to be physically pushed into frame for the final scene because it refused to start. That is the story of Smokey and the Bandit. Picture the situation. It's 1976. A former stuntman named Hal Needham, Reynolds' roommate and longtime stunt double, has a script, a dream, and precisely zero credibility as a film director, and Universal Pictures has agreed to back the project before immediately dispatching someone to Atlanta to carve $1 million from the budget 2 days before cameras roll. Burt Reynolds is already locked in at $1 million salary, which meant Needham and his assistant director David Hamburger spent 30 consecutive hours rewriting the entire shooting schedule just to make the arithmetic survivable. This is not an auspicious beginning by any measure, and yet Smokey and the Bandit would become the second highest grossing domestic film of 1977, beaten only by Star Wars, pulling a nominal North American gross of $126.07 million against a production budget of $4.03 million, marketing costs excluded. That ratio should not be physically possible, but every figure is corroborated across multiple sources. So, here we are. The thing worth understanding about Needham is that he wasn't a director in any conventional sense. He was a stuntman, Reynolds' roommate, and longtime stunt double, a man whose primary professional credential involved falling from things at controlled speed. He'd been pitching versions of this story to studios for years and collecting rejections with impressive consistency, and Universal only greenlit the project because Reynolds personally attached himself to it. Even then, the studio treated it like disposable product, something to drop into southern drive-in theaters over a long weekend and quietly forget. The original screenplay looked nothing like the finished film. The lead character carried the last name LaRue rather than Darville. There was no junior justice anywhere in the script, and the prize for completing the cross-country beer run wasn't $80,000 in cash. It was a truck. You'd think a film built entirely on the premise of a gloriously reckless interstate chase would have sorted out its own stakes earlier in the development process, but apparently not. The transformation from forgettable draft to cultural event began with a single photograph. Needham spotted a modified 1976 Pontiac Firebird Trans AM on the cover of Pontiac's 1977 model year brochure. And that image changed everything because he decided on the spot that the car wasn't going to be a vehicle in the movie. It was going to be the co-star. The starlight black paint, the gold screaming chicken hood decal spanning the entire bonnet, the T-top roof panels, the gold snowflake wheels catching Georgia light at speed. He contacted Pontiac and requested 6 cars. They sent 4. Those 4 Trans Ams were actually modified 1976 models fitted with 1977 specification components, including the updated nose treatment, the shaker hood scoop, and the revised wheel design, each powered by the 6.6-liter, 400 cubic inch V8, producing around 200 horsepower through a 4-speed manual transmission. Honest, unexaggerated numbers with nothing exotic hiding underneath. On screen, though, with that black and gold livery doing exactly what Pontiac's designers had hoped it would do, the 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Special Edition looked like something engineered specifically to violate speed limits and disappear before anyone caught the plate. There is a dry irony buried somewhere in the engine bay worth mentioning here. The thundering V8 sound you actually hear in the finished film does not belong to the Trans Am at all. Filmmakers decided the car's real engine note lacked the necessary menace, so they dubbed in audio from a 1955 Chevrolet 150 Custom, the same vehicle used in American Graffiti. The most recognizable automotive sound of an entire generation was on loan from a completely different movie. And then there was the other co-star that tends to get overlooked. Jerry Reed, who plays the Bandit's partner Snowman, spends the majority of the film behind the wheel of a Kenworth W900, hauling 400 cases of Coors across state lines. Reed also wrote and performed Eastbound and Down, the film's theme song, which became a top 5 country hit and arguably did as much as the Trans Am to lodge the movie in the cultural memory. The trucker CB radio culture of the 1970s, Breaker Breaker, Smokey Bear, 10-4, was already at its peak when this film arrived, and Needham understood instinctively that the Kenworth and the Trans Am together told a more complete story than either could alone. That trucking culture context, the second half of the film's identity, tends to get flattened in retrospect by how comprehensively the black and gold Trans Am won the visual argument. Sally Field came within one executive's opinion of never appearing in this film. Universal's leadership told Needham directly that she wasn't attractive enough for the part, and Reynolds overruled them personally, refusing to proceed without her. Field later described the production as feeling almost entirely improvised, which tracks reasonably well given that Needham was operating on a compressed schedule with 4 cars he couldn't afford to lose and a budget that had already been surgically reduced before a single frame was shot. Jackie Gleason invented Junior Justice by refusing to ride alone. "I can't be in the car alone," he told the production, requesting someone to play against. And Mike Henry stepped into the role of Junior Justice as a direct result of that single conversation. Gleason's instinct turned out to be correct in the most commercially useful way possible, because the Justice family dynamic became one of the film's most beloved recurring elements, which is genuinely impressive given that it was conceived on the spot because one actor found solo driving unappealing. The name Buford T. Justice wasn't a writer's invention either. Reynolds' father, who had served as police chief of Riviera Beach, Florida, had known a real Florida highway patrolman carrying that name, and Reynolds Sr. also inadvertently contributed the word "sumbitch" to the American cultural vocabulary. Some families leave behind financial legacies. This one left behind a sheriff and a profanity, and honestly, that seems like the better deal. 3 future Dukes of Hazzard cast members, Ben Jones, John Schneider, and Sonny Schroyer, appear in uncredited roles throughout the film, a crossover that feels inevitable in retrospect, but that nobody was tracking at the time. The pipeline between this film and that television series, both rooted in Southern automotive culture and a cheerful disregard for law enforcement, ran considerably deeper than the credits suggested. The Coors beer at the center of the whole enterprise wasn't a comic invention either. Coors was genuinely unpasteurized at the time and legally restricted from sale east of the Mississippi River, with distribution limits capping transport at 1,000 miles from the Golden, Colorado brewery before the product spoiled. President Eisenhower reportedly arranged to have Coors smuggled for personal consumption, and Gerald Ford did the same. The film's MacGuffin wasn't a screenwriter's flight of fancy. It was a real underground economy with genuine presidential participation, which makes the whole premise feel slightly less absurd and considerably more American. By the time production wrapped, all 3 stunt Trans Ams had been destroyed during filming. The 4th car, originally the promotional vehicle, was pressed into active service when the stunt cars ran out, and it failed mechanically before the final scene could be completed. The crew pushed it manually into position. That's the car visible in the closing frames of the movie, being pushed by the people who made the film, which is either a fitting metaphor or simply the logical conclusion of running 4 cars into the ground across a Georgia summer. Universal subsequently prohibited the sale of any surviving components, citing substantial frame damage and liability concerns. Every original filming car from Smokey and the Bandit is gone. None of them survived. And yet, the market consequences were enormous. Trans Am sales climbed from 68,745 units in 1977 to 93,341 in 1978, then pushed to 117,108 in 1979, and for the first time in the model's history, the Trans Am outsold the Chevrolet Camaro outright. Dealerships reported 6-month waiting lists specifically for black examples. Pontiac extended Reynolds a standing offer of a new Trans Am every year as a gesture of appreciation, and new GM leadership later canceled the arrangement without particular ceremony. Reynolds described the explanation he received with the kind of diplomatic restraint you'd expect from someone who'd just been told a handshake agreement expired along with the executive who made it. The film's release strategy was itself an experiment that nobody intended to run. Smokey and the Bandit opened Memorial Day weekend 1977 across 386 theaters in the South only, drive-in theaters chief among them, which were still the dominant exhibition format across rural Georgia and the broader Southeast, generating $2.69 million in its opening days, with Universal treating it as a regional test rather than a genuine wide release. By the end of June, it had pulled $11.09 million from southern markets alone, and by the time it expanded to northern states in late July, the film had already achieved word-of-mouth velocity that no marketing budget could have manufactured. Inflation-adjusted domestic gross in 2024 dollars sits at approximately $512 million, and the only 1977 film that beat it domestically was Star Wars. That's not bad company to finish second too. What I find genuinely compelling about this film's legacy is that it remains physically intact in every sense except the one that started it all. The cultural footprint is enormous, the franchise continued. The television show it influenced ran for years, and the auction market for anything connected to the production remains active. Reynolds' personal replica Trans Am sold at Julien's auctions in June 2019 for $317,500, and a promotional car reached $550,000 at Barrett-Jackson in 2016. The original filming cars, the actual 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Special Edition vehicles that created all of this, are not sitting in collections or waiting for restoration. They're gone, which makes every surviving replica and tribute car simultaneously more meaningful and, if you think about it too long, slightly melancholy. The 1897 Henry County Courthouse in McDonough, Georgia, still stands exactly as it appeared as Gleason's backdrop across multiple scenes. Several other filming locations across Jonesboro and Atlanta have since been demolished or absorbed into redevelopment, and with the 50th anniversary approaching in 2027, heritage tourism officials in Clayton County and Henry County are actively working to document and preserve what remains before more of it disappears into the ordinary progress of Georgia real estate. Needham went on to direct Smokey and The Bandit 2 and Cannonball Run, and he never stopped approaching filmmaking from the inside of a stunt, understanding weight and speed and physical consequence in a way that directors who came up through conventional channels often don't. The bridge jump sequence in this film used a car fitted with a booster apparatus to clear the gap, and the stunt Trans Am brought in for that sequence was reportedly prepared by a NASCAR garage with a 700 horsepower engine and a manual transmission, which is a considerable distance from the stock 200 horsepower specification the road cars carried. The Hollywood Reporter listed Smokey and the Bandit as carrying the best stunts of 1977 as recently as 2025, nearly 50 years after release, which for a film Universal initially positioned as disposable Southern entertainment is a verdict worth sitting with for a moment. One final detail that tends to get lost in the broader story. The 1976 Trans Am that Needham saw on that Pontiac brochure cover, the photograph that prompted him to make the car a co-star rather than a prop, was later discovered as a barn find in South Carolina by a woman named Renee Martino. Reynolds called it the official firstborn Bandit when it surfaced. It had been sitting undiscovered in a barn while the cultural mythology it inspired sold 500,000 tickets a week across the American South. 4 cars built, 4 cars destroyed, 1 brochure photograph, and a film that rewrote the American automotive sales calendar for 3 consecutive years. The pattern of what Hollywood intends versus what actually endures is exactly the territory this channel covers, and it runs a lot deeper than one movie about a Trans Am and a truckload of beer.